Good morning, Saints. I thought this was very, very significant this morning news item in terms of the Ezekiel 38 war. Turkish F-16s shoot down Russian Su-24 warplane near the Syrian border. And of course, both sides have a different version of the story. Turkey says they were given 10 warnings to this Russian plane that they were in the Turkish airspace. And it's there. You can see these pictures here. I caught video, of course, of this thing going down. Bam. And Russia confirmed the downing of their plane, which, there had been speculation that Turkey had shot down another plane in the past, but it was very muddied in terms of whether that was a drone, was it a jet, what was going on. Both sides are confirming the same event. Of course, the plane lands in Syria, crashes in Syria, and so the Russian story is probably more credible at this point, just based on where it ended and all that. You can come read the story. I'll link it down below, but that's been the outlier in this whole Ezekiel 38-39 in the formation of everything has been Turkey, really, because it's Ezekiel 38-39, the classic interpretation, not the Joel Richardson one, is Russia in military alliance with Iran coming down against Israel, but it's Turkey and the northern countries in Africa. Now, sorry, those northern countries in Africa, they're most of them have been flipped over in terms of the Islamic State, and the governments have been thrown down, and so it's plausible that this is what we're seeing, is these countries could be aligning, but since Turkey never really aligned, it's just curious to me how that was going to play out. And who's not in alignment are exactly the people who shouldn't be in alignment according to the prophecy. You don't see Saudi Arabia. Matter of fact, many suspect, and I think it's a credible thing to suspect, that Saudi Arabia is helping the U.S., unfortunately, arm and equip and even train the rebels that end up being ISIS, or if you want to say more directly, we're helping fuel the whole ISIS thing. And I don't, this is being done by the Luciferians. It's not country specific anymore, but according to Ezekiel 38-39, the U.S. probably, if we're there, we're just protesting. We don't know exactly how that goes, but we're not militarily a leader. Also in protest would be Saudi Arabia and Yemen, according to the prophecy. And many suspect that that's because for some reason we're been crippled. And the other one is they're coming down in this alliance against Israel, and can't remember if I've done a video on this, but there's been several articles out there that the Mossad and former or current Israeli colonels could be leading some of these ISIS groups around. And so if you just think about how this might come together, if Israel, according to the intelligence sources maybe of these other governments, including especially Russia, is seen in somehow backing ISIS. Now, why would they want to do that? Because Hezbollah to their north and Syria have constantly been threatening Israel for years. And now if this radical jihadist group is the one that overthrows Syria, for instance, and is directly battling Hezbollah in Syria, Israel can stand back like their hands are clean, even though it's a covert proxy war to their northern border. So you can see that happening. You can see Saudi Arabia wanting to be involved in a similar way because they're Sunni and they're threatened by the nuclear aspirations of Iran. And that's been very clear for years. And then you see the U.S. involvement in training, openly training the Free Syrian rebels, or the rebels, whatever you want to say, right there in Jordan. And so you can see how the sides, according to the prophecy, are in position. And this last element here, Turkey being a NATO member country, how does that work? And so here you see, wouldn't Russia have reason to come into Turkey if this was truly, a blatant downing of one of their jets, not in Turkish airspace? And that's what they're claiming. They got the satellite data that claims this was completely done on the Syrian side of the border. And so I think it could be a major triggering event because both sides agreed it happened, which again I think is new news. Timing's really interesting on the Saints because we know, the little video there that it's going viral now, but it's the Israeli boy who was, kind of a secular Jewish boy that claimed to have had his heavenly experience, saying that the war was going to begin within a couple of months, and that was in September. And then he was claiming that the redemption of Israel was on the heels of this 2-week war. And I did a video on that saying, well, we know tribulation period's 7 years, and it's at the end of the 7 years is the redemption of Israel. All you have to do is read Daniel 9, verse 24. You see all the parts of the redemption of Israel listed, and that doesn't happen until the end of the 7-year period, which is right there in verse 27. So, this is why I say the Jewish people are being set up big time to accept what the full Bible, including the New Testament, would say the Antichrist is first to arrive. And unfortunately, there's going to be enough Israelis, enough Jewish people that accept him in that he's going to have the temple being rebuilt, and at which point he's going to enter and declare himself as God before anybody wakes up to what's going on. And so we were looking for this last event of Turkey somehow being realigned, and it could be because they're going to get militarily dominated by Russia if this is a triggering event. I just want to remind you of another part of this puzzle. Now, this is the non-biblical stuff, but what I think is important about this, and we'll go up here, is that this a number of ancient rabbis hundreds of years ago have talked about the redemption of Israel in one form or another. And I've covered most of them, in different videos. But this one, the Vilna Gaon, when you hear that the Russians have captured the city of Crimea, the times of Messiah have started. Well, that was, what, year and a half, 2 years ago. This is the 1720, he lived 1720 to 1797, this rabbi here. And then down here, I was just trying to get to it. When you hear the Russians have captured the city of Crimea, you should know that the times of Messiah have started, that his steps are being heard. And when you hear that the Russians have reached the city of Constantinople, today's Istanbul, you should put on your Shabbat clothes and don't take them off, because it means the Messiah is about to come any minute. And I'll just say that I think that what we're seeing here is unfortunately a deception that's gone back hundreds of years, because that would align with what the little Jewish boy had said as well, that you're going to see the Russians coming down, which is there in Ezekiel 38, but then immediately they talk about redemption, and that goes against, of course, what I just talked about in Daniel from the Old Testament, and 2 Thessalonians 2 from the New Testament speaks of the ordering of these events along with the book of Revelation. And so the story is twisted or flawed, but in a subtle way, and yet you've got many of the rabbis in Israel thinking that this is going to be a quick war followed by the redemption of Israel, when in fact it's the beginning of the tribulation period. And I've got a couple of videos there where I've made the assumption that the red horse rider in Revelation 6 is very likely the same war that's being discussed here in Ezekiel 38, because the passages have some alignment. You see that again in Joel 2. And that's the beginning of the tribulation period in terms of the actual activity, the war that's coming. So that's how close I think we are, saints, to this, to the redemption of the church and the beginning of the time of Jacob's trouble. One more indication from the Old Testament that this story of a fast war and full redemption of Israel is a poor interpretation. Read Jeremiah 30:31. And I think you'll see also in there that this can't just be a snap, quick war and it's all over and Israel is redeemed. So there you go, saints. Now I wanted to bring up one other thing. So if Russia, according to that last prophecy, and again, I would say that these rabbis did prophesy something, just the source of that prophecy, I don't think was from God the Father, but if those events play out, that it's Russia first taking Crimea, which happened, then Russia coming into Istanbul, that it's a Russian invasion that flips Turkey, and not some sort of a political alignment. That's what it appears to me. Now, I could be wrong. But if that's the case, that would also, solve the other problems, which, what do we have? We have right now Russia leading the Security Council and the UN to make these votes, along with France, to call for all the UN Council to back action against ISIS. So you can see what's happening here, I think, is the UN is going to back sort of this coalition to bring a war against ISIS. Now let's pretend for a minute, for whatever reason, the United States has been crippled, Saudi Arabia crippled, even possibly England being crippled, because according to Ezekiel 38:39, it's Tarshish and the young lions that are in protest, and that very well could be England. So if you paint that picture and yet you have the whole UN backing action against ISIS, and if ISIS is seen as being supported by Israel in some sense to destabilize Syria and to put pressure against Hezbollah in Lebanon, you can see you have all these countries coming together that would come down on Israel at some point. Again, if the U.S. was neutralized, Saudi Arabia was out of the picture, that story makes perfect sense. Now, would that not also be the perfect point of entry for the Antichrist? You have all nations coming to fight the Islamic State, and so you'd have a call to basically have one government rule all of these armies that are coming against something nebulous, this Islamic State. And isn't it convenient that with the quote Syrian refugee crisis, jihadis have gone into all of Europe, the US, and wherever, this coalition army then would necessarily have to go across the entire globe searching out these jihadis. And isn't that what we see as these global-sized war? Matter of fact, in Joel 2, as it compares it to the locust army, it says the years that the locusts have eaten, and not, I pointed this out in my prior video, not just like a 2-week period. They're there for the 7 years as a coalition army, or basically under the Antichrist here at some point after the Ezekiel 38-39 war. So saints, I think this story, again, we could have the facts wrong. Maybe that jet downing isn't as significant as what I would think it might be. But it's the first time that I've seen a coherent story of why Turkey flips from NATO, could be part of this Ezekiel 38-39 battle in some sense, and how the world's armies come together so that the Antichrist can lead them for the 7 years. I think all the pieces are there, saints. And so I'll leave you with that. I think it's significant, but to be honest, we're not going to know. The church will be gone before we really know the final answer. So I'll leave you with that. God bless you. If you haven't surrendered your life to Christ, I don't think you have hardly, no time left. That's my guess, is there's no time left. If you've been sitting the fence, or if you're not sure any of this is real, everything the Bible said about the end times is fulfilled, stage set, in process. I really don't think there's any time left. Ask Jesus to forgive you for your sins. Surrender to him, and you'll be part of the church that gets taken away. God bless you, saints.